So give us the lowdown, because I know we don't have you for a whole lot of long, time tonight, but I want to hear what's going on this season, what's going on in the future. I feel like we're going to be revisiting some of the themes that we talked about last season. Now we will be circling a bit on Draymond Green, who I think this situation a year later has kind of manifested itself in a way that I saw kind of happening a bit last season, but now it's in its kind of whole crazy new form. A lot of angles between Kerr, his treatment of the situation, the media, the team. I mean, what's your sort of thought process before, but to how you guys get to, basically giving Steph what he deserves, which is the best during this window where he's playing at like peak levels. Like his numbers are incredible. You guys aren't winning games, but oh my God, he is playing so well right now. Best I've probably ever seen. So how do you guys augment this window of opportunity where he's probably here at peak powers?
Well, I think, if you look at the last couple games, Steph has actually fallen off a little bit. And I think it's because he's having to do too much because he doesn't have the supporting cast around him. We got a lot of injuries right now. We got obviously Draymond, who's taken himself out through his antics. So it'd be interesting to see what the team looks like at full strength. Maybe another 2 to 3 weeks with Chris Paul eventually coming back, Draymond eventually coming back. He's conditioning right now. He's back on the bench. But it's really a make or break probably next month, month and a half before the
Mm-hmm.
trade deadline. And as much as I hate to say it, so I saw a report today, I think it was from Shams. Wiggins is probably going to get moved, but what does that really do? What's that going
Yeah.
to bring back? Can you
Mm-hmm.
give it a run? We're starting to border on territory of one of three things, in my opinion. The blasphemous thing, but I'll just get it out of the way first, is trade Steph. Like send him to a place,
Oh
get a
man, no,
huge
yeah.
return, but do right by him so he can go chase another chip.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's going to happen. There's no way in hell that this ownership would
Mm-hmm.
ever
Mm-hmm.
trade Steph.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think the most likely thing and what I think they need to do, depending on where we're at, let's say 6 weeks from now, is probably tear down the team around Steph. Go ahead and let them struggle for a year. It sucks they're going to lose a year or two of Steph, but do a quick rebuild and see if Steph can't be just like a spot up shooter without having to be the main ball handler for the next 3 to 5 years. Because I think he could fit the mold of a LeBron where he could kind of obviously way different players, but doesn't have to essentially exert all the energy all the time and still be a really effective player. And I think this is what's unfortunately most likely to happen, they'll retool at the deadline. They'll get rid of some pieces. The pieces they bring back in aren't really going to be meaningful. They'll get into the playoffs. We'll go out in the second round again, and we'll probably be doing that for a couple years. And unfortunately, the Bay Area fans have seen it with the Giants, seen it with the Sharks. When you keep overcommitting, then you're in for the long slide, and that's what I really hope we don't see.
Yeah. So I think, like, first, if we go through the most probable scenario, which is retooling around Steph, there's sort of two paths I think you sort of take, to do that approach. One is, of course, Wiggins can net you something in return. I think resuscitating his value gives you probably more than it would trading a player like him, because I think that him being in a new surrounding may actually wake him up a bit and have him playing because he's a valuable player. He can guard every position. He can rebound the ball. He's not hitting his shots right now. That's one of the big things.
Yeah,
He's lost all aggressiveness, doesn't go to the free throw line. So, I mean, but those things for me are very motor type of
yeah,
process. And
very
so,
much. This is everything Wiggs is.
yeah.
Unfortunately, when he's engaged, probably a top 20 player. When he's not engaged, a fringe bench player. And he has all the tools, and that's what makes it so unfortunate.
It's
It's not like he's
100%.
a DiVincenzo or GP2 that has to ball out every night to stay on the roster. He can take nights off and still be an NBA player because he's just got all the tools.
And so as far as so there's that part of the process. But and so when we talk about Wiggins, he's in this very unique class of someone who was on the championship squad, but not a part of the legacy team. So in a lot of
Mm,
ways, the loyalty there is not necessarily something that's very much like the two other polar opposite situations, which I think is sort of the direction you have to take, which are the young studs. And now Kuminga and Moody, those assets have sort of had another year in development. That's a whole interesting conversation, I think, in of itself. And then you also have obviously Klay Thompson due for an extension,
mm.
Draymond Green still on the team. What's your thought process behind, I guess, these core group of players? Is this a team that you can actually have between these guys, or who is sort of where's the movement here between those four
Sure.
players?
And you're doing some disrespect to Pajemski there. He's probably been the fourth
Oh,
best
he's
player on the team this
incredible.
year.
Oh no, no, no. We're going to
Definitely.
talk about him. He's untouchable, my friend. He's
Yeah, he is.
untouchable. He's
The
in
the
a also unique position. He's incredible.
the fact that he's not getting any love just top 5, top 10 for potential rookie of the year. He's not going to
Hmm.
be up in the top 3. But you go and look at the Vegas odds, he's not on the board.
Oh
It's
man,
criminal. I think
it's
he's the
criminal. Absolutely.
third or fourth leading rookie in points scored, and I think third in rebounds. And he's a shooting guard, and he's a top 5 rookie leader in rebounds. It's insane. His effort is just incredible. But, kind of back to your point. Um, so I think if Wiggins is gone, and the problem is they can get hard capped in a lot of ways, but this front office also knows how to move pieces and do creative things. I think the short answer is if Draymond and/or Clay are willing to come back on sweetheart deals, then they can be part of this future. But they need a 1B or a really good 2 behind Steph to make this older core function in a way that can actually win another title. I look back at like the early years with Andrew Bogut, and while he wasn't a dominant NBA player in all aspects of the game, he was dominant at his position. So I could see something like that. That's why people I think are calling, have talked all different players, and I think the packages to actually get them here have never been realistic. But you
Hmm.
need someone that's either going to be a a nightly 25-point scorer, or you need someone that can just be absolutely dominant in a different position and take some pressure off of Steph. Absent that, I really do think maybe don't resign Clay. He's gonna. Clay could win you a championship, but Clay could also cost you the ability to get into the playoffs, depending on how he's shooting.
Hmm.
Draymond, same thing potentially with the antics. Now, I honestly think we're going to see a change Draymond. I've got a $20 moment bet out there with someone in the Nine Lives Lounge that Draymond's not going to hit anyone for the rest of the season. I think I'm very confident in that bet. But those are both players that can hurt and harm you with their decision making, whether that be shot selection or what they're doing on the floor. So this current iteration, I think, needs an all-star caliber player. That's probably the easiest way to put it, to plug into this
Hmm.
roster. And Wiggins was when they won the title, and he's currently not, obviously. Or it's get rid of Dre, get rid of Clay, get a lot more get a lot more cap flexibility, then maybe go out and try and sign a free agent that can pair well with Steph. Like Beal, even though he's hurt all the time, would have been interesting during the off season. That obviously didn't work, and I think it's going to work out better for the Warriors that he didn't come. When Dame was getting shopped around, I thought that would have been interesting, but that just ages up the core way too much. So I don't know. But I think my lean is going to be you're going to have to build around Steph / the younger players, and hopefully 2 to 3 years from now, you'll have the ability to take that core and maybe make 1 or 2 runs at a title, see if you can get Steph at least one, and go from there.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. I'd be remiss without saying too. It's interesting because Trace Jackson Jr. like Trace also is
Hmm.
playing incredible right now for the squad. We're talking about just amazing drafting by the Warriors
Yep.
with non-lottery spots. So Pachensky was also a non-lottery pick, right? Or was
Yeah.
he in the lottery?
Just outside. I think he was 19.
He was like 19, I think, right? So he
Yeah.
was just so ended the first like round, and so you have him, and then you also have Trace Jackson, who I don't think also was like anywhere
Well,
near that, and so
he's a double machine. He was like the fifth to last pick in the second round, and pulled one of the Aaron Rodgers, everyone's going to
mhm.
regret passing on me kind of thing on Twitter, and he's starting to show what he can do in this league.
So to me, it's those two players right now that I
Hmm.
think may make, and it's a shame too because I think Kuminga has a lot of tools to play really good basketball in the NBA. I just don't see how he fits in this particular system. I think he has more value in the NBA than value for the Golden State Warriors, and he's a tremendous. I think he's a good player. He's probably going to net you some good value back, but that's I think part of at least some kind of value going out and bringing in somebody palatable like forward. I think that's where you can maybe make that decision that you wouldn't have made last season because you didn't have those chips for the future like you have in Trace and like you have. But Moses Moody, obviously, that's a sunk cost, I think, at this point, and it's kind of confusing why he doesn't play more than he actually does,
Hmm.
especially given how some of the players have been out of the rotation. But that's probably a better question for you who watches them closer than I do. But yeah, I think that's the route that I would go is see what I can maybe get because they're going to be due for an extension anyway. It's probably time. I don't think we're in any position to see those two players even reach their full potential right now because the Warriors need to win right this second, and that's almost at odds with developing those two players to
Sure.
reach max trade value.
Getting to be like a Wiseman type situation. Like if they can't
Right.
help, if it's going to take another 2 years, but then again, that's kind of where I go with the take of maybe let him play for the next 2 years and ship off Clay and Dre if that's the route that the Warriors end up choosing to take. Kaminga is really unfortunate because I actually model him out as Andre Iguodala, and that's a piece that has shown that this can work. But then you have to be
Hmm.
focused on defense, focused
Hmm.
on attacking the rim, locked into the play, making smart decisions. And he's young; he's 20. Like it's no fault on him, but his body type and profile could exactly be Andre Iguodala. It's just he's probably 5 years too young, 5 years too less experience than he really needs to have in the NBA to have that kind of wherewithal. And then Moody is an interesting case. I actually took my daughter to her first NBA game
Hmm.
week and a half ago, the
Congrats.
Pistons game. Yeah, appreciate. Oh, she had a blast. It was so much
That's
fun.
awesome.
But the entire, and I've never seen this in the last 10 years with the Warriors. Last time I can remember anything like this is the booing Bob Myers right as when the Bogut trade happened. Monte
Okay.
Ellis.
Monte Ellis. Okay.
That the
Hmm.
arena is actually calling for the Warriors to do something that they're not doing. And the crowd, 3 different times during the Pistons game, was
Moody.
chanting Moody,
Mm.
trying to get him in, and finally got in. And that's the loudest I'd heard that arena up to that point in that game because it was just kind of a weird slog back and forth, up two, down two, up two. So I don't know. It's Kerr has people that get into his doghouse and don't play for whatever reason. I think he's the better fit for the Warriors. I don't know if he's the
Right.
right talent piece, but yeah, he would slot in pretty much in any lineup. Although the problem with Kaminga playing as many minutes, though I think maybe he's more athletically gifted, is he can't play with Wiggins. So now
That's the main thing.
yeah,
Hmm.
you're essentially creating two rotations that you can't overlap those two players, and then you can't necessarily bring in Moody depending on who else you're going to sub in and out in those two rotations. And it's like those two players both being on the team is really problematic right now.
Yeah. No. Exactly.
Because
And
because
that's
we
and that's.
because they're neither of they're
Mhm.
playing. If they're playing up to their standard, then who cares? But it's we got a lot of problems right now.
A lot of problems, but there's some malleability here. So, like we were talking about for Pajensky, he fits the Warriors perfectly. I think he's going to be a lifer over there. He fits the system perfectly. He does everything on the floor. I mean, and it's funny too that you mentioned sort of. I guess you got the Golden State Warriors, big media team, big market team, right? Won multiple titles. They should be really on the map if they have a star rookie that's doing some really cool stuff on this team. Warriors aren't winning, of course, so maybe that's why there's not as much of an acumen. But if you
Mhm.
take sort of what Austin Reeves was doing last season for the Lakers and what he's doing for the Warriors this year, besides the fact that the Lakers are winning more games, maybe they won more games towards the second half of the season than the Warriors are winning, sort of getting into the second half of the season. But to me, it's all kind of the same as far as like the contributions from both of those players. So I don't know why Austin Reeves gets so much love the way that he does, in a way that I guess Pachensky kind of doesn't as a rookie. When they both, in my opinion, just really fit their rosters well. And even Austin Reeves is a lot older, I think, than Pachensky. Pachensky is how old? He's like 23,
Yeah,
22.
he's a little on the older side.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely ready to come or was ready to come and play in this league with these players.
Hmm. Yeah, and so obviously, I would be remiss without asking for any, and even if these are like trades that aren't entirely realistic, in some ways, I guess they theoretically could be.
Mhm.
Um, So, anyone from the Bulls that you as a Warriors fan would be interested in sort of blowing up your team to go and bring on, one of the Bulls players on the Warriors. For instance, I've heard Vooch being talked about in the past. Before the Orlando Bulls trade, I had heard him get floated quite a bit for the Warriors back then. DeMar DeRozan, non-spacing sort of ISO player that I don't think you guys have had really in a form like him since KD, and he's nowhere near KD, but he gives you that sort of ability on the floor. And I don't know anyone else. Caruso's out there, good defender. I don't know if he changes anything for your team, but it seems like you're missing that Dante DiVincenzo sort of small guard to hide around Steph Curry. So I don't know. Is there anyone on the Bulls that would sort of tempt you at all whatsoever as a Warriors fan?
No, it's DeRozan actually. I'm trying to find it in Discord right now, but I was pitching something earlier in the year that kind of got shot down by the community. But I think DeRozan fits not again, I think he makes the core too old. And I think that was the big complaint. But if let's say the Warriors had they were 22 and 17, kind of definitely performing well, but not overachieve. Well, I think that would be overachieving for them now, but it's hard to it's hard to take a look at this roster and be like, they should be winning more. They're not. They are what their roster is. But let's say that they weren't dominating, but were higher up in the standings. Then I think you could justify plugging in someone like DeRozan with maybe a few other pieces. Then you ship out either Kuminga or Moody, Wiggins. I can't remember what was the other contract to make it all work, and like a first round or something like that. But that, as you said, kind of like the KD effect, it gives you that second option that you can go to. That's kind of what the Warriors were hoping Chris Paul, and to some extent, especially earlier in the year. But we know Chris Paul's old. Chris Paul gets hurt, and that's where we're at now.
Mm-hmm.
But he can be a secondary option when Steph isn't shooting well or the threes aren't going down. DeRozan would be, not as good a passer, but that times 3 to 5, and so he could carry the team a little bit.
He's an underrated passer, yeah. But obviously not as good as Chris Paul, but yeah, I mean, he fits
not a top 10 all-time passer.
No, of course.
He can play his own game, kind of like KD did.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very interesting to me. I think Caruso coming back, kind of as you identified, missing a little bit of grit, some spot-up shooting, a little bit of defense that we lost with DiVincenzo. We have pieces on the team like a Moody that should be able to do that. His three-point shooting actually this year has been great. But it's just, that's kind of what I saw. I think there's some other interesting deals out there. But there's nothing. My hesitancy is I don't think you can fix this team right now with one splash trade and what you're going to have to do and how you're going to get hard capped out. I don't see this team right now having them. And if they catch fire, if they get in there, and as long as they're healthy, they will be one of the 3 to 4 most dangerous teams in the playoff, between the pedigree, still having a top 3 to 5 player in the world, and just the ability for them to shoot people out of the gym. Anything can happen. So at that point, sure, but that's well past the trade deadline. I don't think the Warriors should commit those assets at this point. I think maybe a retool, maybe see if they can, and that's why I thought DeRozan would be better, because I don't think it's a high ask. I don't think the Bulls would probably like to dump salary at this point. So I don't think you're going to have to give away like 3 first-round picks for some of the top names that are going to be on the market at the trade deadline. You don't have to completely mortgage the future to go get them. But a lot of people shot me down, but that's still my belief.
Yeah, I just think the only thing about just sort of the way that the market's working right now is that there aren't a whole lot of sellers. So there's going to be an inflection point that's going to happen. There's way more buyers than there are sellers right now. And that's just right now because there's a lot of truncated people in the standings in the West that haven't made that decision, whether they want to really go in for the play-in and just miss out, or whether they want to sort of move up from the play-in scenario to the second tier. People are looking for upgrades or thinking if they want to make the upgrade decision or not next month in. Warriors are in that position. That's why I think when you said at first your theory being the next real 30 days, well, up until the trade deadline, that's really you guys making the decision whether you want to go in that direction or not. There's like 4 or 5 teams that I look at that are like the real sellers out there. And so I think because of the amount of teams that want to make their upgrades, that's why I've been championing what the New York Knicks have done by going and getting OG Anunoby before the other sellers could enter into that race. They went and set the price on OG Anunoby, and that's it. They walked away clean with the asset, and only really having to give players like RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickly, who they probably weren't going to pay, instead of draft picks. So I think now with Caruso, you have the Bulls who are sellers. You probably have the Hornets, the Pistons, the usual suspects. I think the OKC Thunder could be potential buyers out there. They're a very good team. They have a ton of assets. So in the West, they look like a sleeping giant sort of in the waters out there. And then there's a couple other teams around the NBA that I think could maybe make that decision. Miami is one of them, but they don't have a lot of assets. But yeah, the Warriors I think are in that class of buyers that can outbid a lot of teams just because of their draft assets, a couple of them, and then also to their young players who I think make up the difference, or experienced players like Andrew Wiggins. Yep. So yeah.
So I found the trade, and now I remember when and why I did this. I'll put up on the screen a second, but I'm actually framing this question to you because and at the time the person in this trade wasn't playing so well. He's come on a little bit, but I want to know how you feel about this as a Bulls fan and whether or not you'd accept this. Salaries match, everything matches. It can happen. So it's DeRozan and Caruso.
Caruso.
A first and Klay Thompson on an expiring contract.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so wait, you said Caruso?
Caruso and DeRozan.
And DeRozan. The only thing about that trade is just Klay Thompson is on an expiring deal, so there would have to be some handshake agreement that an extension is. And Uh,
Oh, you think I would think as a Bulls fan, you'd want to let Clay walk at that point.
you probably do, given what his asking price is, but
Correct.
then I think the Bulls could do better than a Klay Thompson rental for the season for Caruso specifically.
Mhm.
DeRozan's walking anyway, most likely, or he's getting an extension from the Bulls. Whatever is the case, that's a sort of looming subject right there. But I think Caruso is one of the players that when he hits the open market, it may be too fresh for where Chicago's going to be wanting to put their money. They may just like stockpile bad assets, build up their draft capital, and go that direction. And so a player like Caruso, who can help a team right now, I think they want to get a little bit more for him. So that's sort of where I am. The first round pick is interesting if you make the bet that adding those two players, they wouldn't be as good, depending on
Mhm.
when the pick would happen. But that's maybe the only counter that I have. But of course, if you're the Warriors and you can pull that off, you do it. And I think, though, that if you're the Chicago Bulls, if you do want to sort of get in this middle ground, I think signing Klay Thompson is a theoretical. It's a mover for
Bridge.
the franchise.
Yeah.
People
I would
like
say
him.
it's interesting. Yeah,
He
it would
could
definitely
recruit.
put butts in the seats.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see anything. But he's going to command a lot of money. But what are you doing if
Mhm.
you're the Bulls anyway?
Yeah.
Who are you going to attract? So
So
you might as well. Yeah.
let's
Sorry.
change around a little bit because I don't think Clay is going to get moved, at least unless it's some sort of blockbuster at this point, because he's
Right.
picked up his play. What about a trade that would be like a Wiggins, a Kaminga, a first for DeRozan and Caruso
Kuminga, you said a first, and who else?
and Wiggins?
And Wiggins. And I still have Levine. I still have Vooch. I have Kuminga crashing the boards now. I have but you see, it's that issue that you just told me about
Yep,
before. You're
they
a
don't play
basketball
well
guy.
together.
Those are the two players that you cannot play together. So it's
Yeah,
just it's
and
it's
maybe it's
tough,
got to
and
be
you're paying Wiggins
Moody.
so much money. He has 4
Yeah,
years still, I think.
yep. So Wiggins and Moody may make a little more sense. It's not a move I think the Warriors would want to make, but
Yeah, and that would be tough to sell the Bulls on, I think.
yep,
But if you, yeah, I think that's a little bit tougher. But I think you can yield so you said for DeRozan though, right?
yeah.
Yeah, no, I think if you're the
DeRozan and
Bulls,
Caruso.
I mean, you could develop Kuminga for the next couple of years. DeRozan's probably walking anyway.
Yep.
It just depends on what the market price is going to be for DeRozan, because I think that's sort of the biggest question for me is how do teams view a guy like him who's A, getting to like the wrong side of his 30s, B, is due for an extension, C, doesn't space the floor. So I
Hmm.
do think that for those three reasons, he actually fits the Warriors asking price probably better than other teams. And I hadn't actually thought about that. So I do like the mole of that contract more. It just depends on how the Bulls would view someone like Kuminga. Is he going to mesh with like the other projects? Patrick Williams, oh my God, Io DeSumo. It's just, all these players that you can see the sort of ceilings, but then their floors are so low. Sometimes it's just,
Yeah,
could be
it's
chaotic when
probably
you have too much of that.
we got some of that over here right now, unfortunately.